Now to our panellists this afternoon. Dudley Kingsnorth is our first panellist. Dudley has over 50 years' experience in the international mining industry through positions that he's held in operations, project development, marketing, consulting and business development. His employment includes positions held with Bechtel, Alcoa, Shell, Rio Tinto, Greenbushes and Ashton Mining. Dudley is recognised as a world authority on the rare earths market and rare earths project development through his 30-year association with the industry, initially as project manager of the Mount Weld rare earths projects and over the past 20 years as an independent consultant to the industry. Currently, Dudley is non-executive chairman of Australian Rare Earths Limited. So Dudley, thank you for being with us this afternoon. Felicity Repercioli Muir, a professional geologist with a wealth of mineral exploration and resource development experience. Felicity is currently Technical Director of Indiana Resources, focused on gold, rare earths and base metals in South Australia. Felicity is also Non-Executive Director of both aspiring nickel producer Widgie Nickel and copper explorer Recharge Metals. So Felicity, hello and welcome. Ron Mitchell. Ron is the Global Lithium Managing Director. He comes with over 25 years' experience in the industry, with more than 10 years in the lithium and battery metals industry. He's had senior roles at Tianqi Lithium and Talison Lithium. He's also the inaugural chairman of the London Metal Exchange's Lithium Committee, a role that he's held now for more than 2 years. Ron joined Global Lithium at the beginning of this year, and in that time he's overseen several significant developments, including the 10-year offtake agreement with major shareholder Suzhou TANA Ultra Clean Technology and the introduction of Mineral Resources as a cornerstone investor, in addition to the drilling programs at both the Manna and Marble Bar lithium projects. So thank you also, Ron, for participating this afternoon. Thomas Lyne is an economic geologist with over 10 years' experience in mining and exploration. Thomas is currently the CEO of Taruga Minerals, an ASX-listed mineral exploration company that's focused on copper and rare earth elements in South Australia. And last but no means least, our moderator this afternoon, Yala McGrady. He's a committee member of the WA Mining Club, a highly motivated and results-driven professional with a deep passion for business and leadership development. You'll see that passion on show this afternoon, I'm sure. Yala thrives when tasked with building connections with key stakeholders and clients using strong emotional intelligence. He works within Fortescue's Community, Environment and Government team, which is tasked with creating economic development opportunities for native title partners and Aboriginal businesses. Yala is committed to encouraging and empowering the next generation of Indigenous leaders to take advantage of the vast career opportunities within the resources sector. He's a proud Gamilaroi man originating from Tumala, located in northern New South Wales. So don't forget to submit your questions as we go. Time permitting, I'm sure Yala will get to as many of those as he possibly can. But for now, over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. And thanks to our panellists for joining us this afternoon. I was in the hot seat last year, so I know exactly how you guys feel. But thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. This is going to be a really insightful conversation around we're really shining the spotlight on the junior miners. Obviously here in Perth, we see the buildings behind us, the BHPs, the Rios, the Fortescues of the world. Really wanted to hone in on what the juniors are doing for our industry. So the objective for this panel discussion is for you, the audience, to walk away with a much better understanding, not only of these guys' businesses, but junior miners in general, and the value they add to our industry. So before we deep dive into the questions, I'll just start with Ron. Ron, can you just give us a high-level overview of what constitutes a junior miner?
Sure, Yella. Well, again, thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks, Yella, for the opportunity. I'll start by saying this might appear a little bit controversial. I'm not a big fan of the word junior. So you're either an early stage or advanced stage explorer, a developer or a producer. That said, talking about what constitutes an early or advanced stage explorer, obviously there's a number of challenges, particularly in the market we're in at the moment. But typically, you've got a resource or an asset that's pre-economic, and that comes with challenges. So you're typically running quite skinny management teams, so you need to be quite multi-skilled at the management level. There's obviously challenges attracting talent, but also customers, partners, investors. They're quite inherent for the space we're in. And then more broadly, having an understanding of the ever-changing, regulatory approvals process and environment. It's unprecedented, some of the change we've experienced here in Western Australia in the last sort of 5 to 6 years, and keeping on top of those changes is critical. And if you don't, you just get caught up in a sea of red tape. And we've seen that for many companies, that typical stagnation that can occur. ESG, front and centre. I think as an early advanced explorer, you need to really pay very special attention to this thematic, because it's evolving almost on a daily basis. And it's not just the E, the S and the G. There's so many other attributes as it relates to that particular thematic. And finishing off, really an understanding of the value chain you're in. You're producing a commodity, a product, yes, it goes to an end user that's then converted into something else. But having line of sight through that value chain, and ultimately, what is the final product that's produced with whatever commodity you're mining? And as it relates to battery metals, the value chain is quite a significant one. And having line of sight and relationships all the way through the OEMs, ultimately the car makers, is really, really important. Understanding what's happening in terms of technology trends can really help define your business and also attract the talent that you're looking to grow. And closing out, I guess ideally, what makes you unique as a company? What separates you from your peers? And having a really compelling value proposition that you can apply to firstly get talent, retain talent, but then also get the investors and the customers coming through the door. So just some things to consider, Yella.
Thanks, Ron. All right, we'll get stuck into the questions. First question, given what's going on around the world at present, from inflationary pressures, interest rates rising, a war in Europe, and geopolitical tensions building in the South China Sea, how is this impacting capital markets for the junior miners? Tom, we'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. Well, obviously it has had a significant impact on the market valuation of a lot of junior companies. They've been hit a little bit harder than some of the majors recently. You see a lot of companies who have lost 30 to 40% of the value of their company over the last 6 months for no real good reason apart from market sentiment. And typically when there's a global crisis going on, you see people become more conservative with their funds, and they pull their cash out and they hide it under their pillow, a lot of investors. But there are a group of, I suppose, opportunistic investors, sophisticated investors who look for opportunity during these times. So there still is capital available because the sharks are out looking for these opportunities where they can come in at a lower price, where company value has been diminished slightly, without any tangible change to the asset value. So there is access to capital, but some people have to understand that they're going to have to dilute the stock to raise capital more than they would have had to in good times. So that's basically where I would say things are at the moment. But being a junior company, we're not producing revenue stream. We're not producing revenue. We're not mining companies, so we don't have an operational asset. Therefore, in order to get capital and to continue exploration to create value for our shareholders, we have to continue to raise capital to do that. So that's what, one of the things that separates us from the majors, who can weather these storms by just using the revenue that's generated, profits are generated from production.
Great. Any other panellists want to touch on that as well?
I might make a comment there. In terms of critical materials, what you have to present to the market is a vision that you have for your company. There's got to be a balance there. You can't start out by saying, well, we're going to be a major supplier to Toyota. That doesn't work. What you have to do is to say, well, there's an opportunity in the rare earth sector, and rare earths are used in this, and very important to electric vehicles. We have a resource which has this mineral in it, and we're going to develop a resource. We're developing a process, and we're commencing our discussion with downstream processes. And as you progress over the next 2 or 3 years, you explain the steps. So logically, you would go out and you would drill, and you would have a resource. Maybe it's only inferred. The next step is it's an indicated resource, and you've got more confidence in the processing, and maybe you started engaging with a community. But you have to take your investors along with you. You can't start out with the big vision and all that stays there. You've still got to have that vision. Basically, you've got to take the investors, and more importantly, in many ways, the local community to show how you're developing value for not only your shareholders, but for the local community, which does require a lot of effort and a lot of forethought as you do that.
Great. Ron or Felicity, want to touch on that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, similar sort of commentary. It's really about getting back to that unique value piece. What is it? Is it your management team? Is it your asset class? Is it the location of your asset? What makes you special? And really drilling down and understanding that and doing a peer comparison to really flag that to investors, that if you invest in us, we've got these attributes that are going to make us successful. So that's something I'm trying to do as MD for Global and raising the profile, obviously. One thing I have seen as it relates to battery material investors, the battery metal investors, is certainly they're becoming a lot more savvy in terms of they're a lot curious. They're far more curious than they used to be, but also they're greener. So they're looking to invest in companies that have those fantastic ESG attributes. So again, sort of it's something I think everyone in the room is conscious of, clearly, but it's about doing more than saying and having a fit for purpose. I know we'll talk about it a bit later, but I can't overstate how important that is, particularly us as early and advanced explorers.
Yeah, no, good point on the green energy side of things. So the trend of majors and mid-tier miners shifting strategies to focus on global electrification and decarbonisation seems to be an overdrive at the moment. I know it is at Fortescue anyway. How can junior miners support the industry to transition to future-facing commodities? Dudley, we'll start with yourself.
Okay, I think I'd just like to say, with respect to the rare earth sector, China is dominant, and it's not dominant suddenly. China has had a long-term plan. It's got where it is through 30 to 40 years effort. With respect to rare earths, and to a certain extent lithium and many other minerals, I like to use the analogy, France will sell you a bottle of wine, but it doesn't really want to sell you the grapes. Now, China doesn't really want to sell anybody rare earths. They want to sell people an electric vehicle or a wind turbine. And they've gone to great lengths to have integrated vertical supply chains. The 5-year plan before last, China adopted a logo which said, Made in China 2025. The reason for that was that they have to find jobs for 200 million people who move from the country to the urban areas. And that's going to be created by manufacturing jobs. Now, if you look at it simplistically, unless we do more processing in Australia, those jobs are going to go to China. And we could see a decimation of the automotive industry globally unless we address that and look at participating in more steps of the supply chain. We're not going to be building electric vehicles here within 5 years, but certainly we can be manufacturing the rare earth permanent magnets. So returning to what Ron said early on, in this business, you have to be mindful of the total supply chain. You have to have your eye on there. You have to understand what the needs are. And without going on too much, if you take the rare earth sector, to produce a magnet, which is the main driver of the industry, the magnet itself you don't want any calcium in it. Now, God bless Japan, we've got just-in-time inventory, so the 8 steps between the mine and the magnet, there's not a lot of conversation, but there needs to be. If we can take the calcium out at the mine site with beneficiation, it's much cheaper than doing it later on when we've got a metal in a furnace. So that is what we need to do. As Ron has said, we need to be part of that vertically integrated supply chain from, I like to say, the mine to the showroom. We've got to start sooner than that, but don't give it away by shipping a concentrate.
Great insight there, Dudley. Tom, what differentiates juniors to the mid-tiers and the majors in terms of future-facing commodities?
Well, I think it's not just on the previous question and to address that one, it's not just what the junior companies can do, but it's a collaboration with government, because really it's government support and initiatives which drive how much downstream processing we can do here, and it's the junior companies which are making the discoveries most of the time of these new mineral discoveries. So with the change for ESG metals or green metals, obviously a lot of junior companies have changed direction, looking for lithium, looking for rare earths and cobalt and other things like that. Bigger companies and juggernauts tend to take a bit longer to turn around and change direction, but the juniors can change commodity focuses quite quickly. So that's what really the ability to find those new resources here in Australia falls down to the juniors to blaze that trail. So that's kind of what we do, and ultimately it's the larger companies that end up picking up those assets if major discoveries are made. So, the larger companies rely often on the junior companies to make the discoveries, to go out there, to be a little bit more bold, to test new models and find these critical metals. So in South Australia, for example, the government has offered Accelerated Discovery Initiative grant, which is $325,000 grants that they give out to assist with exploration, which they're really focusing on critical metals at the moment. We've received, Taruga, 2 of those. So last year we were the single largest recipient of the ADI grant. This year we've doubled it, so we've got $650,000 primarily for rare earth element exploration, because they know that in order to become what the state really wants to be in the next 5 years, we need those resources discovered on home turf, and the amount of risk that's there with the reliance on China that Dudley touched on is so big. There's so many military applications, defence applications that these metals provide, in addition to the green economy that they're going to support. Yes. So we don't talk about the defence significance of rare earths and other critical metals very much, because it's not as sexy as electrification and solar farms, but that is a significant sovereign risk. There is a significant defence risk associated with not having your own supply of these critical metals. And that's why the government, even there's government funding from the US government available to Australian companies, even potentially now, to secure that supply. It's not just Australia, it's a collaboration through the Critical Minerals Initiative and alliances between Western countries. So it's not just a question of supply and demand for electrification, it's a question of defence risk and yeah, it's a much broader way in which governments are looking at the significance of these metals, and juniors are the ones who are tasked with making those discoveries.
Great point, Tom. I didn't know that rare earths was critical in terms of the military application. So yeah, very interesting. Thank you. Moving on, so shifting gears, I wanted to touch on heritage, and I'm sure everybody's heard of the Juukan Gorge incident from a couple of years ago. I guess there's still a reset going on at the moment across the industry in terms of heritage, native title. What does it mean? There's a new Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act which will come into play next year. I thought I'll just sort of kick things off on this one and sort of give a bit of or frame the question. There seems to be a lot of risk associated with heritage at this point in time, and I'm quite an optimistic person. I think there's more of an opportunity than a risk. People are seeing red tape with heritage, whether it's juniors, mid-tiers, majors, slowing down the rate at which we can mine. But for me, as I mentioned, I see an opportunity where we can have monumental impacts, positive impacts with our native title partners across this state and the rest of Australia due to the changes from Juukan. Now, what does it mean? It means that companies have to engage early and often with native title partners before a mine plan would be made inside the 4 walls of the company, and then they'd basically go and try and push for a Section 18. Those days are over. Now what we're finding is the industry, or companies in particular, sitting down with native title owners and saying, this is our mine plan, what do you guys think? What's significant to you? What are places that are non-negotiable? What are we open to potentially having impact on? So I think there's a real opportunity to drive some positive, particularly economic development opportunities for native title people. But I'm really curious, how do the juniors look at native title, considering that you guys aren't producing yet, and so they may be thinking, oh, I'm dealing with FMG and BHP, I can, there's big money opportunities, but you guys are in early exploration. So I'll start with Ron.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and look, our view as a company, and certainly reflecting on what's happened in the past, there's been a lot of really wonderful lessons learned, I think, that we can certainly benefit from going forward, and we view the TOs as being an integral stakeholder. We value them as a stakeholder. We have very much a front door approach in terms of engagement, and I think that's really key. Transparency is really important. And also getting on country. You know, taking the time and the effort to go and spend time with the TOs on country, I think is really, really quite critical, and it's something I'm looking to embark on next month. Hopefully, getting up in the Pilbara, spending a couple of days camping with the TOs. So I'm really looking forward to. And again, comparing yourself against your peers, what can you do that's different? You don't necessarily have to look at what history's done. What can you do that's out of the box that can make a difference? So just some collective thoughts from my side, but. Yeah, I think I probably agree your sentiment. There's opportunity. Yes, there's challenges, but with those challenges, certainly there's opportunities.
Great. Felicity, did you want to touch on how your company's approach?
Sure. Our project in South Australia, we deal with 3 native title claimant groups. So, you know, key to getting on the ground in the first place is, you know, obtaining those heritage agreements that obviously give you access. And through those, you know, it's really key to build those relationships with all of the TOs, work with them collaboratively on all the heritage surveys. And I mean, we are, you know, a tiny explorer. You know, we do, you know, a program a month pretty much over there, but from the last 3 programs, each and every time, we have had one of the TOs that has been getting trained up as a field assistant. And so it's providing them opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have. And, you know, it's a really fruitful arrangement. You know, we get to local knowledge plus engaging someone within the area. And obviously they get the upskilling approach. So it's, you know, a really win-win for both company and the traditional elders that we're dealing with.
Absolutely, and sort of just to finish off on that point, I often say that mining is the perfect partner for Aboriginal communities in regional and remote Australia. I'm not talking about Aboriginal people in Perth, I'm not talking about Aboriginal people in Sydney or Melbourne, I'm talking about Aboriginal people in Newman, I'm talking about people in Kununurra. These type of regional and remote areas, the employment opportunities and the contracting opportunities that come from mining, I believe, are unmatched. The government's looking at our industry saying, what are they doing? And it's working, and whether it's from the junior side of things, what we just heard, all the way through to the majors, we're doing great work in this space. And I think we have an opportunity now, over the next decade, to really set the trend for the rest of the nation and the rest of the industry. So, awesome, thank you for that. Moving on.
Sorry, Yella, just on that, I just want to highlight that I think you're basically saying this, that really mining and exploration is the place where reconciliation is most likely to happen and where progress is most likely to happen in Australia. Absolutely. On this front. If you look at all the things that are happening, everything that's coming to a head, all the social issues which are being brought up and all of the challenges, they all seem to be happening in the mining space. So this is the location where everything's going to be resolved and where progress is going to be made. And I think people are starting to recognise that opportunity. And the difference between juniors and majors, I think, is something that also needs to be looked at. You know, often there's a big difference in resources between junior and majors and what they can do, and juniors need to be much more creative. Often juniors think that they don't need to do any ESG-related stuff at an early stage because their shareholders just want to see returns. But that's changing now. You know, junior companies have a responsibility to do everything they can in the ESG space, and to do what they can for local communities, and no longer are you seeing companies wait till their $500 million market cap before they start employing local people and doing what they can.
Yeah, no, great point, Tom. Great point to finish up. So moving on, so we're seeing more and more investment decisions not just made on the anticipated return of investment from major firms or even the retail investor, but how are companies in the junior space, I guess, addressing the ESG framework that's expected of companies now, considering that you guys aren't mining and making revenue, but are you still focusing on ESG? Felicity, I'll start with you.
I think from an exploration company point of view, you know, obviously we run pretty lean. Shareholders want to see as much money going into the ground as possible. So therefore that is generally our focus. We may not have invested in ESG to the point of having all the framework, baseline studies, you know, engage the various providers. However, having said that, and I think Ron pretty much touched on it before, it's not your words around ESG, it's actually what you do. And for an explorer, you know, we're generally the first ones on the ground. So the first time the drill rig rocks up or you're doing a survey within that area. So you're the first time that area really has that social impact from you as a company. So it's really imperative that you kind of, you know, get yourself off onto the right foot from the word go, that you've engaged with all of your traditional owners, you've engaged with the local community, you've engaged with, you know, your various, pastoral leaseholders, freeholds. So it's all about that key framework that you set up from the word go, and that you really kind of put your best foot forward. And I think in terms of from that, it is much easier to build, a good corporate culture when you're still a small company. If you can get it right as a small company, then moving forward is a lot easier.
Great point. Dudley, did you want to?
Yeah, it's very important to address the local issues, and as Rhonda said, you've got to interact with the TOs from a very early stage. I worked on the Coolan Island project, and in actual fact, we were hoping to have our first meeting on Coolan Island when we had an exploration license in place, but we didn't. So we went ahead with it anyway, and we learned a whole lot over those 3 or 4 days with the TOs on Coolan Island, and we camped out and did all those sorts. And we learned a lot. And what happened was, by doing that up front, we knew those areas that were really special to them. So rather than presenting them with a mine plan and they're saying, well, we don't want that, we knew before we prepared that mine plan those areas that were of particular significance to them. Now, we were able to do that, well, not exactly by accident, but certainly we were quite fortuitous. The other, and returning to this issue, particularly of looking at the total supply chain, I was lucky. When I did my first marketing trip for rare earths, I went to the UK and I went to Johnson & Matthey. Now, Johnson & Matthey, major producer of catalytic converters for cars, and we were trying to sell them some cerium. So I went along and they said, oh, look, environmental protection is pretty important to us. When you come, we want you to make a presentation on the environment. So I went along, and the managing director's there. So he says, oh, I want to hear about your environmental management plan and how you're going to address it, what the issues. So I did that presentation. I was prepared because I was told environmental management and the impact was important. And I'll tell you what, I had tougher questions from him than I had from the Greens or the EPA or anybody else. And at the end of it, he said, Dudley, I'm confident that you and the company are not going to create problems for us. The last thing I want is somebody at my AGM waving a big banner at the back saying, this is what's happening at the front end of this process. I now authorise you to negotiate with our purchasing department. Now, I would like to see many more of our end users actually adopt that so that they understand what we're doing to meet those criteria. And I think we've probably got to, as a mining group, try and speak at some of these conferences that the automotive companies organise and others, and explain to them what we're doing to minimise our impact on the environment, so that they're not afraid or prepared to admit that right at the front of the process to produce an electric vehicle there is a mine. A lot of them don't really want to admit that. So we've got a responsibility to actually go out there and explain to them, make them quite comfortable that we're very responsible. We're at the front end of the supply chain. Don't ignore us. We're important to you.
Great. No, great insight. Thanks for sharing. Look, this next question, this is my favourite question because I'm actually seriously interested in this one. So want to pull on the heartstrings of the entrepreneurs in the room, the risk takers, the potential mining magnets that we have here with us this afternoon, the young and the young at heart. What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur within the junior mining space? Tom, we'll start with you.
All right, well, just to put it briefly, start and don't stop. That's the main thing. You start and you don't stop. For me personally, I went from being an employee to starting my own company quite quickly. And I just had a passion and desire to run my own company, so it was something I had to do. And I was lucky enough to have a partner who supported me. I did put my personal money on the line. I got a credit card, I maxed it out flying around Australia, trying to find someone who would invest in the company, and my pressure was by the time I had $0 left on that credit card, I needed someone to have invested in the company, and fortunately it worked out for me. But I didn't really have a plan B for what was going to happen at the end if it didn't work out. I think having skin in the game is important, and just you just got to go for it.
And there was an interesting story you shared before around when you're at your old employer, when they are around your performance review. Did you want to share that story?
So as a graduate geologist, my first ever performance review, the principal geologist pulls me into his office and says, look, Tom, we really enjoy your antics, but look, basically, you're just too enthusiastic. And that stuck with me for my whole career. When I do a performance review for anyone now, just remember that. And he finished the conversation by saying, he said, you just need to do the job you're assigned and stick to that. And then he finished at the end of the meeting by saying, we really need our geologists to do more think outside of the box and do extracurricular project work to get this mine operating better, which was a massive contradiction. But that comment, you're just too enthusiastic, I just thought it was unbelievable. Like, it just represents a previous mentality,
Yes.
that just holds entrepreneurship back, holds creative thinking back. And really, that needs to be nurtured and embraced in companies. And smaller junior companies tend to have more ability to attract people like that. And sometimes, historically, the larger companies tend to beat enthusiasm out of people. So, I mean, that's changing now.
Yes, yes. Ron, we might go down the line.
Well, Tom, we need more people like you, so can I get your card? Yeah, look, I think that was really brilliantly articulated. Look, from our perspective, I see it as a really great opportunity. Being involved in the West Australian mining sector, being the greatest mining jurisdiction on the planet, having this Team WA brand represented so brilliantly overseas. Now, finally, with our WA borders open, I'm just amazed at the level of interest in the battery metal space of all these inbound visitors. And I think the risk-taking that's required for entrepreneurship as it relates to, and I'll use that expression again, early and advanced stage exploration, is really important, but it's calculated. And again, if we look around this room, the level of technical, commercial expertise we have at our disposal here as a West Australian mining industry, it is best in class. There's no other jurisdiction on the planet that has this talent pool that we have. And I think we need to really promote it. We need to be more aggressive in the promotion. It allows us as leaders of junior companies to really go hard at our projects with the confidence that the WA brand is behind us, first and foremost. We have all this technical expertise, commercial expertise, all of our contractors. It is really world leading, and I think that allows us to take, some would consider risks, but they're very much calculated risks.
Great, thanks guys. Just last question, just in terms of talent, I might start with yourself, Felicity. Like, what does a junior miner look for in terms of talent to join their business?
Yep. I suppose I started off in the big end of town, worked for Placidome and Harmony with gold, and then worked in BHP iron ore. And to me, as much as that gave me a sound background to the start of my career, I just found that it wasn't where home was. And it wasn't until probably I delved into the junior sector that was what really interested me. And I think that the junior sector kind of balanced well with what my characteristics were. I think the junior sector, it's generally a lot more of a nimble sector. You've got to be fast moving, you might be reviewing different projects from day to day, different commodities. You really jump from cycle to cycle as opposed to the, majors who are just kind of slow and steady there. And from that point of view, how the sector works, you also need people that have those attributes as well. You need people that can be nimble, they can be quick thinking, they work well together in a small team. They also have to be willing and able to take on a variety of tasks, because you don't just have one hat in a junior sector, in a junior company. You generally, are a bit of a, broad brush personality, I think. So yeah, I suppose that's...
All hands on deck.
Yeah, definitely.
All hands on deck.
Yep.
All right, we're just running short of time. We've got one question here on Slido, and it's from Steve. Thanks for putting your name down, Steve. It is getting harder for early explorers to navigate the increasing regulatory and compliance hurdles. How are your companies managing this? Tom?
Hard work, diligence, and just making sure you get it right and accepting that this is how we need to operate. There's no point complaining about it, getting upset about it. You need to go and meet with government representatives, you need to meet with the regulators, you need a good team around you, get as much assistance as you can, and you just need to nail it. That's what's required to be to have the license to operate in this country now, and we have to accept it.
I think that comes back to your enthusiasm value, Tom, and just never give up type mentality that you touched on before, just keep banging away. Dudley, what about yourself? How do you overcome some of the compliance here?
I'm pretty enthusiastic about rare earths, but whatever I've done, I like to talk to the local community and the government people about the opportunities that we have if we develop this project, while acknowledging that there are risks and asking them to identify what they see as important. And then once again, as I said earlier, the distinct advantage in working for a junior company is that you can have a vision. But coming with that is a responsibility to identify the risks. You can't just identify the opportunity, because there's always risks associated with that. And you have to do that. And as you address each of those risks, I mentioned some of them before, as you progress to convert the project from a few holes in the ground to an operating mine generating revenue, you have to take the community and the government and the Greens with you. And finally, in terms of those detractors, I would say, don't forget your supporters. It's too easy in a community. You might have 2 people out of 2,000 who object to what you're doing. And if you're not careful, they can take up most of your time. You're not going to change their mind. Be polite, but make sure you don't forget your supporters, because they're the people that are going to be there with the tough times, because they'll help you to outvote those people who are trying to stop what you're doing.
Yeah, great point. We've got time for one more. Majors mainly look at acquisitions instead of exploring themselves. How can they better support the junior sector in terms of exploration? Ron?
Oh, it's a good one. Look, I think relationships are really important, and I think the majors and the engagement between the majors and the smaller exploration companies, I think there's opportunities using these sort of forums to have greater engagement, to understand what the hurdles are that we face as smaller companies, whether they're financial or skill-based, and certainly as it relates to skill-based hurdles, you can always acquire skills on a part-time consultant type basis, and that's what we look for. So those relationships are really important. I think just greater networking opportunities. It's not us versus them. We're all in this together. There's opportunities for kind of us to learn and benefit from our collective experiences, whether they're technical, legal, commercial, approvals related. So yeah, just greater engagement, I think, within the sector. Yeah, I see Team WA. I'm a big Team WA supporter. We've got this brand that we need to keep promoting.
All right, final comment. We'll go to Felicity on how the majors can better support explorers and juniors.
Well, I think, following on from that comment, I think, the juniors in general often work very collaboratively together. We've got smaller teams. You really rely on, that sharing of information. So do you mean if the majors were more open to sharing some of their information, because, as we all know, they don't have to make everything publicly, available. It's, not in their realm of, what they need to show. So if they can be more open with what they deliver, and, if it can be more events where everyone comes together, that there's not events that just suit that big end of town and then the events that suit the smaller end of town. So just, a real sharing of information.
Greater collaboration. Awesome.
And I just add, there's got to be greater sharing of infrastructure as well.
Good luck.
They're quite... I'm not having a go at you at all. But there does have to be a greater sharing of infrastructure. Not only that, a better recognition of complementary industries. If you, sorry to revert to the rare earth industry, but rare earth sector uses hydrochloric acid. Now, when you have a chloralkali cell, it produces chlorine and it produces caustic soda. The limit to production of that entity is the amount of chlorine they can sell. So if the economy is doing badly, they cut back on chlorine production because they can't dispose of it, and the price of caustic goes through the roof. So logically, if you can have a rare earth company and an alumina company who use caustic soda in their processing, they've got a unique opportunity to offer to a person who runs a chloralkali plant in that they can sell all they produce. But can you get those two companies together to talk? No. We're doing our own thing. So it's not only that, we've got to look much more carefully about not only the infrastructure, but some of the chemicals and the other things that we're using, where we could have synergies which help both industries, large and small.
Awesome. All right, thank you guys. That concludes our panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Yalla, thank you so much for leading this fascinating discussion this afternoon. I'll get you to stay where you are just for a moment and invite Nat back up to the stage for an official vote of thanks. Thank you.
Well, thanks again for an amazing panel on Explorers in the Spotlight. As always, it's an interesting topic and I learn a little bit more each time. I have been in the exploration space as myself, and I have to say I learnt how much the global economy can actually impact us in Australia and how much it influences what's happening in the explorers space especially. But thank you for your oversight and what's happening in your individual companies, and all the best for the future.
All right. Thank you, panellists. You're free to go. Yalla, you might have to answer to Cass over there. Such was the discussion this afternoon. We want it to continue all afternoon, but we can't. But please, if you want to do so afterwards, then by all means. It's door prize time, though, folks, so hopefully you're all in the running. Our door prize this afternoon comes courtesy of ATI Mirage, and we have Suzanne Webster, who I think is over on table 1 this afternoon. Suzanne, if you wouldn't mind heading up and telling us who the winner of our ATI Mirage training voucher is. This is valued at $1,250, and our lucky winner is...
Jason Bonner.
Congratulations, Jason. Also really pleased to announce that IMARC is on again this year. It's happening in Sydney from November 2 to November 4. And we have a delegate pass to IMARC to give away. So congratulations to Simon Biltoft, I think it is. Simon Biltoft from KSB. Where is Simon? Wherever Simon is, stay where you are. And we'll get that winning ticket to you. You're off to Sydney, it sounds, in November, so congratulations. Also, thank you to the Hyatt Regency for another prize from them. If you haven't booked your end-of-year celebrations, then the Hyatt Regency might just be your option, no matter the size of your event or your budget. From dining in the cafe, restaurant, private event spaces, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day dining, the hotel has you covered. So reach out to the team at the Hyatt for more information. They are giving us a night's accommodation, including breakfast for 2 people. And our winner is Chris Reedman from NAB. Congratulations, Chris. We'll get you that prize to you as well. That brings us to the close for our luncheon this afternoon, folks. Once again, would you please join me in thanking our valued sponsors this afternoon, Como Engineering, Core Integrity and TLT Turbo. Thank you so much for your support this afternoon. If you'd like to continue chatting this afternoon, it seems it's been such a fertile conversation this afternoon. How long have we got the room for now, Cass? Another little bit long. Till 3 o'clock. Okay, so that's a bit of time. If you want to kick on after that, the campfield, of course, is just across the grass there, and I have to say this every time. If you get caught up in your conversation there and you've parked on the Marley lawn, you could be in for some strife. The Marley lawn is locked at 3:30, so if you have parked over there, please be mindful of that. Otherwise, you will struggle to get your car out this afternoon. So on behalf of the WA Mining Club and the President, Natalie Taylor, and the committee, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Good afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you.